Hello and welcome to the Office of Early Childhood webinar, Warm Attitudes Toward Cold Play. My name is Margaret Gustafson, and on behalf of Commissioner Beth Bai and all my colleagues at the OEC, thank you for taking time to explore this topic with us. We're very excited to have this as our second webinar in a series focusing on best practices for healthy childcare. Our first webinar centered on air quality in our childcare programs. We were incredibly fortunate to have Dr. Joe Allen from Harvard School of Public Health to walk us through the science of COVID-19 and other airborne transmissions, what we can do to assess our air quality, and strategies for improving that air quality. We hope that you will definitely use some of those very simple steps that Dr. Allen outlined. I think it's really important to note that Dr. Allen was very clear that we have many layers of precautions in place. Hand hygiene is something built into every early childhood program. Air filtration, opening windows, checking our systems, these are all key for us to look at to make sure that children, families, and staff are safer in our programs. Whether you want to watch that webinar for the first time or go back to certain key parts, the webinar is posted on the OEC's website, as you'll see on our next slide. Today, we are exploring taking children outdoors safely and purposefully, another part of high-quality early childhood programs, and certainly hugely important developmentally to children and health-wise for all of us. We are again very fortunate to have a distinguished lineup of moderators and panelists. Our moderators today are well-known in Connecticut's early childhood field, Donna DeLore and Kristen Kennan from EdAdvance. Donna has been an early childhood education specialist with EdAdvance for over 20 years. She completed graduate work at Wheelock College and has had the privilege of experiences, including and beyond those 20 years, in many early childhood settings. Preschool teacher, center director, parent advocate, NAEYC accreditation facilitator, and technical assistance provider. Kristen has 30 years experience in early childhood education, having earned her bachelor's degree in human development and family relations from the University of Connecticut and her master's degree in early childhood education from Central Connecticut State University. Her work has focused on the areas of infant-toddler care, family child care, Head Start and early Head Start, early childhood community planning, NAEYC accreditation, and familiar tools including the CLASS and Connecticut's ELDS and DOTS. Along with the panelists they will introduce and other OEC staff, as you can see, we are in very good company today. With that said, I'm going to turn this over to Donna and Kristen. Thank you so much for the very important work that you're doing with us.
Thank you, Margaret. If we could take a look at that next slide, it shows that you are able to access the air quality webinar that was already recorded, and that's on the OEC website. And we are really excited to have all of you join us today. We're delighted to share with you some local Connecticut early childhood expertise as we look at outdoor play, including outdoor play in cold weather. We're addressing this topic not just as a strategy to mitigate COVID, because we all know that spending time outdoors is a delightful way to social distance, but we're also coming at this topic from the point of view of looking at it as a strategy to enhance the teaching and learning that takes place in your program. The outdoor environment has so much to offer young children in all seasons, and the panelists that we have are going to share their thoughts and expertise with you. We're honored to have 5 center-based panelists and 3 family child care providers who were very willing to spend time on the phone with Donna and I, on Zoom interviews with us, sending photos, and they have a lot to offer. You're going to meet some of them today on this recorded webinar, and then Donna and I will be able to share the stories of those who were not able to be with us. So the panelists that are present, you see on the slide, are Claudia Murphy from the Children's Learning Center at Mitchell College in New London, Molly Sexton Reed from Pleasant Valley Children's Center in New Hartford, Diane Swanson from Peter Pratt Nature School in New Milford, Kate Vallow of the Community Children's Center at Stores, Anna Zielinski from New Canaan Nature Center in New Canaan, and the family childcare providers who were not able to be with us during this recording, but you'll hear their stories, are Joanne Andrews, who's from Little Kids Daycare LLC in East Haven, Yasmine Avila from Little Scholars Childcare LLC, also in East Haven, and Mary Coburn from Miss Mary's Preschool in New Hartford. So the intent of today's session is really to spark conversation with you and your colleagues back at your program. We're looking to see that you are thinking about ways that you can increase the time that you spend outdoors and ensure that the time you spend outdoors really addresses all of your curriculum in a holistic way. Each setting that you're going to see is unique, just like all of your settings are very unique, but we are sure that by the time you're finished watching this recorded webinar, you will have several ideas to take back with you to think about implementing within your own practices. We're going to hear directly from 5 of the panelists, and you'll also hear the stories of the family childcare providers told through Donna and myself. And we are really thrilled that they were willing to submit photos to us. It really helps to convey the message of all of this. We would like you to keep in mind that some of the photos were taken prior to the pandemic, so you won't necessarily be seeing social distancing practices in all of the photographs.
Donna, I think we have you on mute. No, can we try again?
It appears. How is that? Is that better?
Now we hear
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Here we go. So let me introduce the agenda. Outdoor play is a really key component of a child's early learning experience throughout the year, each day throughout the year. The child enjoys less structure, ample opportunities to investigate and explore nature, really more time to observe, but most importantly, to play. There are varieties of ways that we can provide these outdoor experiences. In the licensed play space, on field trips, certainly community walks, walks on nature trails, just to name a few. And now, during COVID-19, children are much better able to social distance in the outdoor setting. While they're out of doors, classroom windows can be opened and other steps taken to allow air exchange. So let's take a look at the focus for today. We'll explore 6 topics. The first being licensing, some of the misconceptions and versus regulation, in order to dispel some of the myths we hear. Then we're going to be looking at the benefits of everyday outdoor play. What's the value and why is it so important? And the gear, what's appropriate, how to manage it, how to support independence in getting dressed for cold weather. Then take a look at some of the materials and equipment that can be found in the outdoor classroom. And through the lens of the Connecticut ELS, the Early Learning and Development Standards, we'll look at what teaching and learning can occur outdoors. And finally, how can we support staff and families to develop those positive attitudes towards cold weather outdoor play? So to get started, I'd like to introduce 2 of our OEC licensing specialists. Christy Morgan is a centers licensing specialist, and her primary areas are Fairfield and Litchfield counties. Patty Tyberski is a family licensing specialist, also with OEC, and her areas are Hartford and Middlesex counties. You may recognize them if your program is in either of those areas.
Thank you, Donna. While we recognize that regulations differ between center and family-based care, we tried to pick misconceptions and obstacles that both types of providers commonly face. If you have specific questions or obstacles, please reach out to your licensing specialist and if you are center-based, your consultants as well. A common misconception: the state does not allow children outside when the temperature is under 30 degrees or during inclement weather.
There are no regulations regarding weather or temperature with respect to outdoor play. Conversely, providers are required to meet the needs of the children as well as provide for outdoor play as a component of the program schedule. Outdoor play is required daily for child care centers. This information should be addressed in the policies of the program. Expectations of the families who enroll in your program should be outlined and include information on the types of outdoor gear that would be required in order for all children to be able to fully participate in the program.
Two common obstacles programs face are that, one, families do not regularly bring in the proper outdoor gear for their children, and programs cannot require parents to provide proper gear. Second, families do not want their children out in the cold, rain, or snow.
Both of these obstacles should be addressed in your program's policies. If families know at enrollment what is expected during their child's day, it should not be difficult for you as a provider to enforce your policies. Educating your enrolled families on your policies and the importance of outdoor play should help them to remember to bring in what is required for their child to be able to successfully participate in all of the daily activities. Keeping in mind that you would be required to have a care plan for any child with a diagnosis on their health assessment that would prevent them from being able to fully participate in outdoor play. This care plan should outline how you will meet the child's needs.
For any additional obstacles programs face or concerns specific to your facility, please contact your licensing specialist.
So thank you, Christy and Patty, so much. We are very appreciative that you're able to share your perspective from the licensing and regulatory end. So thank you. We're going to start now and ask our panelists to come on camera. And we begin with looking at the first topic, which is the value of outdoor play. When Donna and I did a lot of Zoom interviews of the 5 panelists over the past few weeks, we started each of our conversations by saying, tell us a bit about why outdoor play is so important to you in your program, and in particular, why you continue to value outdoor play even during the cold weather months. So Diane, if you could kick us off and share some of your thoughts and perspective with us.
Absolutely. We are almost entirely outdoor program, and research shows that being outside or time spent outside is beneficial to all of us, not just the children, but the adults as well. So socially, emotionally, physically, academically, time in nature benefits all of us. It goes a little bit further, and research shows that it will lower your blood pressure, boost your immune system, reduce stress, make you more productive, a whole host of benefits to time outside. But outdoor play outside gives you a whole host of new benefits, or an outdoor early childhood experience. So self-regulation, problem solving, risk assessment, executive functioning, empathy, mindfulness, to name a few. To delve a little deeper into executive functioning, your ability to plan, focus, prioritize, negotiate, multitask, control your emotions. Studies have shown that executive functioning skills may be a better indicator of academic success, better than IQ or fluency in numbers and letters. So time spent outside or given time to play outdoor freely with other children in all weather, not just the beautiful days like today, through all seasons, naturally fosters a strong development of your executive functioning skills. So it's beneficial for all of us to spend time outside.
Great. Thank you, Diane. Anna, could you share with us how your program includes outdoor play in the winter as part of your value system?
Absolutely. So we believe in going out in all weather. as long as it's not dangerous. And this year we've been outside about 90% of our school day. We really view nature as a classroom and as a teaching partner. But specifically during the winter months, we see a massive jump in the children's self-awareness, their self-help skills, and their resilience. So for example, a child notices that their mittens are wet, and the teacher helps them articulate what the problem is and provides prompts to help them figure out the solution to that problem. So the children are encouraged to get a pair of dry mittens from their backpack or from the teacher cart and to change their own mittens. The children are empowered that they're able to problem solve and to do these things independently. And we're constantly praising children as they're developing these skills. But beyond that, this year, with being outside so much, we have noticed a dramatic decrease in illnesses in teachers and in children, which has been one of the greatest bonuses this year.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Molly, can you share with the audience what you shared with Donna and I a few weeks ago?
Yeah.
It appears that you might be muted still.
Sorry.
There we go.
Anyway, going outside every day throughout the seasons, and no matter the weather, has been a part of our program for a long time. And we made a switch a few years ago to starting our day outside, because we were finding that when we went out, we're just a half-day preschool program, and that if we left going outside to the end of the morning, the amount of time often got condensed and scrunched. So we've shifted it, so we start the day outside so that we are guaranteed that the children will have at least a half hour of outdoor playtime every day. And during the pandemic, we have expanded the time we stay outside to include our small group activities. And when it's above freezing, we eat snack outside as well. So we've prioritized it by putting it at the start of our day so that we can make sure everybody has it.
Great, thank you. Claudia, could you add your thoughts about how this works within your program's philosophy and value system?
Sure. We actually have gotten the children used to saying, are we going to be in our indoor classroom or our outdoor classroom?
Wow.
So that is how much the children are sort of embracing the fact that we are either inside the classroom or outside in the classroom. While everybody loves to be out in the good weather, I have found that getting the kids excited about being out in the cold weather is even better. I like it better because I think that the amount of learning that goes on when it's cold almost tops the warm weather. And by that I mean it allows us to compare a lot of what we are, say, learning outside. Like, say, for example, we are learning it's like the science that keeps on giving. It's the classroom that keeps on giving. So if we're learning about temperatures, for example, we love to freeze things outside, bring them inside, then explore, estimate, think what's going to happen. We have a lot of I wonder moments. Everything with me is like I wonder. So every question I always get is I wonder, because getting the children to begin to think like that gets them started to think about science. And there's nothing like being out, getting dirty and digging and finding worms and seeing things melt or freeze or fall down or grow, like being outside. So we are just, we really embrace it in, cold weather. I personally love it, so I kind of bring that into the classrooms of like, oh yes, we're going outside.
Great. All right, and Kate, can you share with us about the value of outdoor play for your program?
Sure, yeah. So we're a very green school. We're a member of the Natural Start Alliance as well as an eco-healthy childcare center. We really strive to help each child make their own discoveries about themselves, each other, and their world as they are becoming. We work to foster the development of their self-direction, self-motivation, and independence as they get to know themselves and others as vital members of the classroom and community. As both a play-based and nature-based program, we really naturally extend this idea to the outside. So we also want children to know themselves as vital members of the natural world. And by the time they leave our program, we can see that they have developed as much respect for the earth as they have for themselves and one another. We're really fortunate, as was mentioned before, to live in New England, where we have the opportunity to experience all these changing seasons. And, sometimes they can be bold and loud and messy out there, like we had a few days ago, and sometimes kind of gentle and almost soothing, like a beautiful sunny day like today. And this really mirrors life. We place this high value on learning about these rhythms and really connecting with them. And even connecting with the rhythm of the day a bit more by being outside more, feeling it get dark, maybe the day gets kind of tired like we do. It sounds cliche, and yet here we are remembering that the great outdoors is one of our most honest and beautiful teachers.
Very eloquently said. Thank you, Kate. So it's been wonderful to hear from the 5 panelists present with us that they all have outdoors and including outdoor play in cold weather as part of their value system. Some of what we heard was that there's many benefits to spending out time outside, and in nature, which included health benefits, and that's especially important for us now while we are undergoing the pandemic. There was a lot of comments from the panelists about how much teaching and learning takes place outdoors, and how spending time outdoors, including in the winter, really reflects on programs' beliefs about environmentalism, and the value system drives their priorities, as was stated. So I'm going to turn this over to Donna, and Donna is going to share one of the stories from one of our family childcare providers.
Right. Thanks, Kristen.
Oh, actually, you know what? I'm so sorry, Donna, I've jumped the gun. We have a few pictures to show.
Yep.
We have Pleasant Valley Children's Center showing a photo of them eating outdoors. And the fact that there's a dusting of snow on the ground does not stop them. So they're out there on their tarp having lunch or snack. And in the next slide, we see some children from the Community Children's Center embracing literally and figuratively nature as they hug that tree. Next, we have a quote which we will hear as a recurring theme throughout the afternoon. There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. And here we have some children as we look at the idea that spending time outdoors, the Community Children's Center, that group of children is looking at some scat, which is deer poop. And lastly, we have a picture from Peter Pratt Nature School showing that the value system of children having repeated intimate contact with nature is important for their development. And now, Donna, I'm sorry, I'll hand it over to you.
No problem, Kristen. Thank you. So it's my pleasure to be able to introduce the story of our first family childcare provider, Yasmine Avila. Yasmine has been a family provider for 3 years, and when we spoke to her, she admitted initially she's a bit skeptical about the idea of spending lots of time outdoors in cold and inclement weather. However, she came to realize that being outside was safer for everyone, especially during the pandemic, since it allows for greater social distancing. And this was a motivator for her to take more advantage of her spacious outdoors at her family childcare home. She echoed many of the thoughts of the other panelists for this season. She said a direct benefit of children spending lots of time outside, even in the winter. She sees that they're happier when they spend time outside, and she sees fewer behavior issues. For her school-age children, Yasmine recognizes that there's a certain amount of stress that comes with remote learning. Being outside really helps to combat that stress for the school-agers. Yasmine currently has a group of children with a broad age range from 2 to 10 years old. She has an assistant that works with her for part of the day. Over the years, she's learned a variety of strategies to make the day go smoothly. When it comes to gearing up for cold weather outdoor play, One of the things she does is to make the task more manageable, is to intentionally teach the children the skills that they need for independence. She does this by placing boots, snow pants, mittens in her pretend play area before the cold weather season begins. In this way, the children have plenty of time to develop the skills in dressing for winter. In addition, she uses that multi-age group to her advantage. The older, more skilled children are helping their younger friends. Yasmine has a large outdoor play area with two main components. A section that's close to her home with a consistent features like a kitchen set, a playhouse, a castle, and a slide. The area she will shovel out since it's part of her entry. The main outdoor space is open and enables lots of running and active play. Yasmine described to us that over time, she's gotten more intentional about her curriculum for outdoor time. Years ago, she provided a number of experiences outdoors, and children were certainly engaged. Now, however, she's much more intentional. She's planning around a children's book, using the content of the theme to plan a variety of activities inside and out. She recently focused on a scavenger hunt and strategically placed items outside for children to learn with maps that she created. And once they found those items, they took them indoors and painted them. This is a great example of integrating experiences over a variety of settings, outdoor and indoor. When asked about how families react to her values of spending lots of time outside, Yasmine says that they're all on board. She's very clear at the time of enrollment that they spend a lot of time outside in all weather. This is explicitly stated in her parent handbook. Yasmine told us, quote, "You need to make sure parents know what you do so they can be part of your plan," end of quote. She clearly lets families know that gear will be needed, but recognizes things happen. Therefore, she obtains spare hats, mittens, and other items through donations or goodwill, so no child will be unprepared. Yasmine is aware that not all families are motivated as she is to get out of doors in all sorts of weather. Families will tell her they were inside all weekend and are grateful that she is willing to be able to take the children out daily at her program. The parents know how much joy the children spend outdoors and enjoy it, and it helps them to be in agreement with Yasmine's outdoor plans.
All right, thank you. So if we could ask the panelists to come back on screen, we are going to look at our next topic, which is clothing and logistics. So anybody who has spent any time outdoors in the winter knows that having the right gear is super important. And anyone who has worked with a group of children and knows what it's like to get them dressed up in that gear to go outdoors knows that logistics is also very important. So we're going to ask our panelists to speak to that. And Claudia, I'm going to see if you would be so kind to begin. Can you describe for the viewers what you shared with us about specific winter clothing and the strategies that your teachers use to get everybody geared up to go outdoors, along with the ways that you let families know what gear works well, along with what gear does not work well?
Sure. So to begin with parents and how to sort of get them on board as far as what the children need. When we have our open house in the beginning of the year, they get a list of what they will need come the winter. But you know, parents are very much like children. It's not once and done. So once the winter comes, it goes out on our weekly newsletter on the bottom. Don't forget we're in, or remember we're in cold weather. Please remember your gear and your gear is made up of, and we label, we basically label what the gear that they will need. We also have borrow baskets because we're very sensitive to the fact that gear is expensive. And, oftentimes it's not that the parents don't want to get it, but can't get it. So we do have a borrow basket, and we have exchange programs as well. People whose gear no longer fits and are willing to donate it or want to exchange it for larger sizes or smaller sizes. So that's what we do with the parents. With the children, it's just as important for them to understand how important gear is. So we have a chart throughout the classroom of what goes on first, what goes on second. We lay out all of the clothing in a big circle, and the way that we are teaching the children to do, particularly those that have a onesie sort of snowsuit, is to sit in it like if they're going into a sleeping bag. And I said, don't get up until your toes are wiggling. And if it is a one piece, I say just stay sitting down, put your arm through the tunnel, another arm through the tunnel, whip it up, and then they can stand up. And miraculously, they're dressed by themselves, even though they're 3 years old. With the boots, a strategy that's worked for me a lot is step into your boots versus sitting down and putting on your boots. So I make them line them up, hold on to the wall, to a chair, to a table, and step into your boots, step into your boot. And believe it or not, they're dressed. Snow gear's on, boots are on, and then it's the gloves. We encourage parents strongly in the winter, obviously weather repellent gloves, but we encourage the mitten versus a glove, and we call it a glove with a thumb hole is what I call it with the children, versus a starfish. So when we do starfish, we do the fist, open up, each fish gets a little handle, but that is more difficult for children. So we really encourage the mittens, and teachers use mittens as well, just because it's a lot easier, it's warmer, and we say, find your thumb hole, open your hands, and in they go. So we try to use words and I guess visualization that would make sense for them. And with the parents, as I said, it's always reminding, it's always about the layering. It's not just one sweatshirt, keep it light, but keep a lot of stuff on so they stay warm that way.
Good. All right. You provided a lot of detailed information about making that logistic more manageable. Thank you. Diane, when we met with you a few weeks ago on Zoom, you shared a really interesting story about how you have the children really engage in some pretty good analysis and thinking about what gear is appropriate for the conditions. So could you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So our kids actually arrive, because we're outside all the time, they actually arrive in their gear. So when we're outside, we do a lot of, we discuss a lot about what they should be wearing, if they want to pare down what they're wearing, if they want to take gloves off. I think it was Kate who said if their mittens are wet, to be able to self-regulate and get themselves a second pair of mittens. We also have a volunteer who knitted, a lovely old woman who knitted a whole bunch of extra mittens for us. So, put that out there in your community. But when we're outside, because we're outside all through the year and we start in September, when it's warmer out and we're going through that puddle, it may be okay to get your feet wet. And then we kind of progress on to hiking boots, and it may be okay to get your hiking boots wet. But as the weather gets colder and the puddle's still not frozen or just getting a little bit of frost over the top or a little bit of ice over the top, it's then that we stop and look to see what boots are we wearing. Because some of them, during the change in right now we're all wearing winter boots, but during the change in seasons, some of them may be wearing boots that can go in the puddle and they won't get wet. And some of them will be wearing boots that if they go in the puddle, they'll be wet. And at this point, it's getting a little colder, so they will be uncomfortable. So we actually have kids that will stop in front of a puddle and look down at their feet to decide whether or not that's a good idea, if they should go in there. We also talk about, is today a good day to get wet? We have puddles out there today, so there's a lot of frozen puddles, so there's a little bit of ice on top of it. And so they would play with the ice on top and then realize that it was wet underneath and that the puddle was liquid. And that's when they said, today is not a good day to get wet because it's cold out. But if given the opportunity over a course of time to feel a little bit cold, they don't want to be cold. The children and the staff all want to be comfortable. So a little bit of natural consequences, as it may be, are helpful, especially during the little bit warmer months when being cold isn't dangerous.
Yeah. Thank you. Molly, you had shared with us, as you mentioned earlier, that you altered your daily schedule to have outdoor time first up as one of the ways of dealing with the logistics of outdoor gear. So could you tell us more about that?
Sure. So as Diane said, and you just repeated as well, Kristen, because the children arrive at school ready to stay outside, primarily they're already dressed. So that takes one piece of that task out of our hands. So they come and they're ready to go. Often families, because it can be bulky to be dressed in the car, and all of our families are arriving by car because of where we are. Sometimes families are putting on the last layer outside the car or in the parking lot, but by the time the children get into the playground, they're ready to go. We always have that basket, that borrow basket, or that collection of things that we've accumulated over the years. So if someone forgot their mittens or they forgot their snow pants, we always have extras that we can offer to people to wear for the day. Or if they get wet outside, we can supplement with those things as well. And it is natural consequences. So we often have those clothing resistant children. And, you know, we have told families, you don't have to do that battle. If your child is refusing to put on a jacket or to put on mittens, as long as you send them with them, we will help them and support them in finding those moments when they need to put them on. So we want to give the children that independence and that to validate how they're feeling. There are also, you know, those children who run warm and they don't need the 14 layers on right now because they're running around. So as long as we have the equipment to offer to them when they do get cold, they can make those decisions about how they put that stuff on.
Great, thank you. And Kate, you had shared with us your strategy of staggering children in the process of getting dressed to go outdoors and whatnot. So describe what that looks like, please.
Sure, yeah, of course. So as everybody has mentioned, we know that getting ready for outdoors is quite the process in the wintertime especially. And rather than think of it as just something to kind of, you know, get through, we think of it as part of the curriculum. So we really recognize, of course, the adaptive skills that children are learning when dressing for the outdoors will literally last them a lifetime, from figuring out how to find our things to what belongs to who to how to put them on. Kids are working on fine motor skills and vocabulary and order of operations. You know, every early childhood teacher knows, like, first bathroom and then snow pants, right? So we have a really intentional approach and one that seeks to ease the overall transition by having enough staff to support individual kids to get ready while also limiting their wait time. So as soon as 2 or 3 kids are ready, one teacher will take those kids outside, and then as more get ready, they will be sent out to join. This takes the pressure off having the whole group ready at once and also allows for some natural differentiation and scaffolding of learning. So the kids that can get themselves ready all by themselves are really motivated to get right out, get that playtime in. And the kids that need a little bit of extra help have a quieter space then to be working one-on-one with the teacher for whatever kind of support they need. We also stagger coming indoors when possible. So this is especially important in the winter when the teachers are monitoring the comfort level of the children to make sure that, you know, the kids that might be feeling more cold or recognizing, you know, as was alluded earlier, that their boots aren't working quite the way they expected them to, might need to go in a few minutes before some other ones. So our school is actually fortunate to be able to provide mud pants as well as raincoats to every child. So that helps us extend our outdoor time without kids getting too uncomfortably wet. We also ask families to provide warm enough gear during the colder months, and this is part of our even touring process. So we kind of set that stage that we are going to be going outside even in the cold weather. And then we just have ongoing communication about what's working and what's not. And we do have backup gear to lend as well. You know, if a kid goes through their mittens and their backup mittens, we have mittens to lend. So
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kate. And Anna, we know that families are really an integral piece of making sure that children have the right gear on the right days. So can you tell us a bit about how your program does that communication and coordination with families?
Absolutely. So parent education around dressing children is a big consideration for us. And we begin the process in the summer before school even begins. We send out information about the clothing and the gear necessary for each season and for each weather condition. And we include that in our family handbook. And this year, one of our talented teachers created a short video to give a visual aid to parents about exactly what those layers look like. So we discuss the importance of the layers, the material of the layers, where to find specific gear, boots that will work for all seasons so they don't have to buy multiple pairs of boots. And we also shared little tricks, like some families don't want to purchase long underwear for their children because it can be expensive. But it works just as well for kids to keep their pajamas on underneath their clothes. They're snug fitting anyway. And that's really handy because we do ask parents to drop off their children dressed for the weather, because we do drop off and pick up outside in our outdoor courtyards. If the children aren't dressed properly, like all the other panelists shared, we do have a reserve stash of gear. And the children also bring extra clothes. So they've got a change of clothes, they've got their backup mittens, they often have another hat, extra socks. So we dig into that reserve as well. And as a last resort, we've called families to ask them to drop off additional clothing too, because it is so, so important that the children are adequately dressed for them to thoroughly engage the way that they need to. And we also don't want to assume that families in the program can afford the expense of gear, because it's an expense. So I think Claudia had mentioned that they share gear. And we have done something similar in the past where we had a gear swap, so family could drop off clothes that, or jackets or boots that no longer fit their children, and then other families could come and pick them up. So it was a great free swap of coats, boots, mittens, whatever else there was. And we've also partnered with businesses or companies like Okiwear to get a wholesale discount for families in our program. So we purchased a large order of what the families wanted. So everybody was able to get new gear at a discounted rate. That's what we did this year. Just due to COVID, we weren't sure how comfortable people would be swapping gear, but both have been successful.
Good, thank you. So we've heard a lot of really great tips and strategies and approaches from all the panelists. Let's take a look at the next slide. We'll do sort of a summary. We know that winter weather gloves, rain suits, snow suits, having the right gear is really important for the weather and the conditions. We heard about how important it was to explicitly teach the skills of dressing so children keep gaining in their independence. We heard programs talk about using visual prompts and sequence charts. And I believe when we spoke with you on the phone about that, there's actually some sequence charts in multiple areas of the room. So right there in the zone where the child is getting dressed are reminders of how to do it. We heard tips about making sure that your materials are laid out and organized for the children so they have only what they need at that point in time. We heard a great example of helping children really use their critical thinking skills to determine, do I step in this puddle depending on what my footwear is, or do I not? We heard about the logistical idea of having families do some of the logistical work by bringing their children already dressed for outdoor time, and lots of ideas about gear swaps or tapping into places like Goodwill or Free Cycle. We're going to look now at some photos and see some of what we've been hearing about in action. So we see someone who is dressed not just for the cold, but also for the conditions. It's obviously muddy at that point in time, but this child is wearing something that's designed to withstand that kind of weather and activity, so he can fully engage. Here we see some children in some gear that's easier to put on. You'll notice the two zippers that run down the sides of the blue outfit, making it easier to get little bodies in and little bodies out. On the next slide, we see someone had mentioned that they organize the materials and spread it out on the floor so that children are not bumping up against one another. They have enough space to get in. And again, there's not so much clutter. It's not all the gear out at once. On the next slide, we see a strategy, a rack where boots can be placed upside down, so they're draining and drying when they come in from outdoor play. And let's see if there was one more slide. Nope, so we get ready. I'm gonna turn it over to Donna to think about outdoor materials and environment.
Great, thanks, Kristen. When we bring children out of doors, we think about bringing the indoor classroom out. So what are some of the things that we need to consider? Molly, when we spoke, you were really excited about the large hollow wooden blocks. Can you tell us a little bit about those and how you were able to purchase them?
Sure. They are an incredibly wonderful material. So they come from Community Playthings. So they are built to last. And actually the name of these blocks, they call them their Outlast blocks. And so they are designed to be used outdoors in any kind of situation. So they can get wet, they can get snowed on, they can get muddy. They interlock, so you can create real substantial structures that children build for themselves or for each other. And we were able to purchase that through a grant through the Northwest Community Foundation. They were very generous to us, and they not only paid for the set of blocks, but also for the shed that you can order from Community Playthings. So they have a specific place to be stored. The children know how to put them away and where to find the different pieces. And they were using them today. I had a child take them out because she was trying to clear the snow off the shed and was using them to create a platform so she could reach high enough. So they have found ways to use them in all kinds of weather. They really are a fabulous material.
That's terrific. Thanks, Molly. So Claudia, you said you've got a unique feature of not only having a play space, but also nature trails. So can you tell us what we might see in your outdoor environment?
Sure. As I mentioned to you when we spoke, our school is very, very fortunate. We truly have an outdoor classroom and an indoor classroom. So our outdoor classroom is fully furnished, we'll call it, with parents have made us out of pallets, a very long L-shaped kitchen with a sink in it, not running water, but with a sink in order for children to continue their learning and their playing and their pretending. Pallets are the gifts that keep on giving in a teacher's view. So we actually have even a little house that was built by one of the parents out of pallets that the children can sort of gather in. But as I mentioned, we do have beautiful trails, and within those trails, you can just continue to go and build and make lean-tos for when it rains and cover it with branches. And if there's leaves, you can kind of make yourself a roof. So we are fortunate, I'm going to say, because not every school has that, but it is definitely a great advantage for outdoor exploration.
Great, thank you. And if not every school has nature trails, there might be community parks nearby or other areas just to walk around the community that would be certainly eye-opening and provide some new stimulation. Thanks, Claudia. So Kate, you also mentioned some interesting things that you provide for children, adventure packs and nature journals. Could you talk a little about those?
Sure, yeah. So our school is also fortunate to have some trails. And every child has a backpack that lives at the school to bring along with them on the hikes. The younger group of children have like a basic pack that includes a magnifying glass and binoculars. They learn about wearing the pack, which is exciting in and of itself, right, to figure that out, and how to use those tools to support their investigations and all the discoveries that they have on their adventures. The older have a few more tools, including like a bug catcher that is kind of operates like scissors, so they need a bit more fine motor skill for that. And they also have sit-upons, since they will often stop on their hikes for some discussion before or after a hike to have some reflection about what we've noticed when we've been out there together. The teachers also have backpacks that they bring along with them. to have whatever materials are needed, from books for tracking animals, tracking prints and tracking scat, as was mentioned before, to identification cards and scavenger hunt materials. Recently, the teachers brought along a variety of wild animal feed with them and fruits and vegetables, and the kids made snow cakes for the animals. And then they were able to come back later and check out which animals, track which animals checked out which food, so they could see what they like. The kids do also have nature journals. These can come with them on a hike, or they might live in the classroom. They're generally used after an outdoor experience to make note of what's been observed. The teachers really talk with the kids about how to take notes about their experiences in a scientific way, you know. So if we're using our journals, we're really writing and drawing about something real that we've seen in nature. It might include some questions that we have, just something that we thought was really beautiful or interesting. And so while the backpacks are generally reserved for hikes, we do have generously sized play yards as well that are full of opportunities. We have an outdoor music station and climbers and a mud kitchen and an art wall. We really kind of treat our outdoor spaces like our indoor spaces, in the sense that we approach the design thoughtfully, like having a wide open space in the middle of the yard for running, and having the climbers be sort of on the outer perimeter of the area. We also really think about defined areas with loose parts and open-ended materials. And we're pretty flexible and quick to bring materials from the indoors out, just based on what children are interested in. So.
Thank you, Kate. That's a lot of information. Thank you. That's terrific. Diane, you mentioned that your program is pretty unique in terms of being primarily an outdoor program. So can you talk to us just a little bit about what materials you do have and ones you don't have?
Absolutely. So much like Kate, all of our children carry their backpack with them the entire time, and so do our staff. So for the children, for the most part, have extra mittens inside, possibly a change of clothes depending on the child, and then their lunch and their snack and their reusable water bottle. And then the staff have everything that they need, first aid kit, plus books, so storybooks. And one of our groups actually also brings along field guides, because the kids like to look at, that group likes to look at field guides. And since we have a story time every day and we carry books in our backpack, the children have started carrying books in their backpack as well. So they may, once we get to our adventure spot, they may, grab their book out, or I'll put my books out of my backpack, and they may sit and look at them, or they'll wait till story time and look at them. But for the most part, we don't have any toys. So the things that we do have, we have nets for the frog pond. We have fire starters, a flint and steel, which they can practice lighting their little cotton ball. And trying to think what else we have. That's just about it. We don't have any other toys, so everything that we do is open-ended. They play kitchen and restaurant. They just do it with moss and with bark. Everything they do is completely coming out of their head. Just before coming to here, my group was using a giant log that was on the ground that we put there purposefully, but it was on the ground, and it started off as a train but ended up as a spaceship, and then we were on the moon. So we have very limited toys, so it doesn't take much. It just takes outdoors and children. Again, we are very lucky. We have lots of space here. We have farm animals and gardens and things. But otherwise, it's just children outside in the woods or outside in the meadows.
Thanks, Diane. And I think that what you describe as having many of you have described having lots of outdoor space. Actually, those are the kinds of opportunities can also occur in a more confined licensed space as well. And Anna, can you talk a little bit about some of the open-ended materials that you have in your spaces?
Sure. So in our outdoor courtyards and on our trails and grounds, the materials we're using are intentionally durable and open-ended. So some of the items are old pots and pans, plastic baby dolls, trowels and other digging tools. Chalk has been surprisingly versatile for everything. And then similar to what Diane was saying, we also rely heavily on natural materials, sticks, rocks, tree stumps, pine needles. The snow has been fantastic. And because we're limiting the amount of materials, we've seen a dramatic increase in the children's creativity and how they use materials, similar to what Diane was just talking about. And we're also noticing the depth of their play is so much richer as a result of this. So the children decided that the baby dolls needed to stay warm. It was cold and they didn't have the gear that the kids had. So some children were building beds from pine needles. Some children wanted to use the frying pan that was just being used as a larger trowel because they needed a bigger shovel and they didn't have one. So it's delightfully quirky and creative to watch that. But in addition to the children's materials, the teacher materials have also been really important. And so we are using all-terrain garden carts and deep jet sleds to help teachers transport the items that maybe the children aren't able to carry on their own. So they're transporting water bottles, the first aid kits, play materials, books. And a bonus to that is that the children love to help push and pull the carts and the sled. So for those kids that really benefit from that extra heavy work, those carts serve a dual purpose there too.
Great. You know, it's so interesting to hear a few of you talk about fewer materials, and I often think that less is more when we're thinking about children's creativity and imagination. Thanks, Anna. So maybe if we can advance the slides a bit. Terrific. So let's summarize what we've heard. The value and joy of large outdoor hollow blocks, the adventure packs and journals, which Kate described, and we're going to be able to see pictures of these. Some open-ended materials. Loose parts are such a source of great creativity and play with children. Materials for planting and animal care. And this doesn't need to be an expansive garden. A container garden is certainly a beginning, and an animal or two. And the storage. We hear so often how teachers really need to have storage with materials that are accessible. When children have an idea and they have to, and they want something, if it's right there and available in the outdoor space, that really enhances the play and the experience. So if we can advance to another slide and take a look at some pictures. So this is an example of having the benefit of loose parts and open-ended materials, which equals very creative play. And here the child is using his binoculars. And did you describe this as a fairy garden, Kate, I think? Yeah, okay. The next slide, please. And here are the hollow blocks that Molly was describing, along with the great shed, which is right there, which allows children to select the shape and size they want, create with it, and then replace it. So they're either in a balance beam or just vehicles for sitting. Next, please. And these are the adventure packs and the journals that Kate described with the tools. How exciting that is. And the next slide, please. And I'm glad Anna put a name to these. These are the jet sleds. I had to write that down. Really transporting things, especially in the winter through snow, is much easier with a sled. But as she described, for other times when we need to transport materials, even from the shed to another part of the playground, if a cart would work. And the next, please. And here's that child outside with his field guide, or her field guide, watching what's out in nature and connecting it. Perhaps not reading all the words, but again, identifying trees that they're seeing in their environment. And finally, one more. So if we talk about bringing the indoor environment out of doors, you can see how there are multiple activity areas in this playground setting. So thank you all for sharing your experiences with materials and equipment for the outdoors.
So we have another family childcare provider, Joanne Andrews from East Haven, and she's not able to be with us today, but we are here to tell her story. Joanne has been a licensed family childcare provider for over 15 years, and she had some really great thoughts to share with Donna and I when we met with her a few weeks ago on her thoughts about being outdoors, including being outdoors in the cold weather. When we asked Joanne her reason for spending a lot of time outdoors, including during the cold weather months, Joanne was really quick to say it's just good for them. They sleep better, they have better appetites, She mentioned that they really benefit from all the physical activity that just lends itself to happening in the outdoor setting. But in addition, Joanne talked about the fact that being outdoors and being in nature was also just really good for her own benefits and her own mental health. Over the years, Joanne has had a number of different assistants that might have worked with her, but like many family childcare providers, Joanne has many days where she's the only person working in her family childcare program. So again, being outside, being in nature was very beneficial for her. It enables her to be in a setting where she can sort of slow down a little bit. She's able to, she doesn't need to monitor the, voice levels of the children. She doesn't need to monitor whether or not they're running inside her home because they're outdoors. And this gives her that unique opportunity to slow down, step back, observe the children in a bit of a different way to learn about where they're at developmentally. Joanne told Donna and I, fresh air and sunshine does a body good, and we agreed with her wholeheartedly. We did ask Joanne if over the years, if she's had any families who were not really 100% on board with the fact that she spends time outdoors in all sorts of weather. And she actually said that she really has not had any families that were upset or disagreeable to that idea. In fact, most families are very, very appreciative that Joanne is able and willing to do this. Many of her families stated that for a variety of reasons, they might not be spending a lot of time outdoors, and they're happy that she does it. The families recognize that young children benefit greatly from being outside, even in the cold weather, and that their children really do like it. She looked back over the years and thought about only one child in 15 years that wasn't so comfortable with being outdoors in the winter. But she said even that child, over a period of time, became more comfortable with outdoor play in the cold weather, in part because the other children really included him in their activities. And the family was really thrilled because they were just delighted that Joanne and her persistence of being outdoors in cold weather really increased his comfort zone. So that was a real exciting story. When we asked Joanne about her space, she often smiled and she just kept saying, "I'm really spoiled." So not only does Joanne have some features at her family childcare program that you would expect to see outdoors, she has a swing set and a climber and a sandbox, but there's some things that you might not expect, like a very, very large garden and some goats and ducks and rabbits. And we recognize that not all family childcare programs would have this as a possibility. But Joanne said to us, her large garden wasn't always there, and it actually started as a relatively small container gardening project. At the time, she was involved with a program called All Our Kin. That's a nationally recognized nonprofit organization that trains, supports, and sustains family childcare educators, and they're located right here in Connecticut. And it was All Our Kin that encouraged her to start with some container gardening. And when she got that off the ground, then they encouraged her to have the children be involved, not just on sunny days, but in all types of weather. So now Joanne's program has rain boots, raincoats, and umbrellas so that the children can be outdoors in many different types of weather to care for or to look and see how their gardens are doing. One of the last things that Joanne shared with us that really stood out was somewhat unique to family childcare providers and the fact that there are days when they're the only adult working in the program. She said it was really very important to have good storage outside, i.e. a really nice shed. So she described to us by having a shed outdoors, not only is she able to have her first aid kit and supplies right there at her fingertips, but in addition, she's able to have the other wide variety of materials that she might need to have or the children might be requesting. And especially when we think about this, if we're trying to keep children outdoors for a prolonged amount of time, they might need different materials along the way. So Joanne mentioned that having a shed was an important part of making outdoor play, especially in the winter, easier to do and less stressful on her. And there she is with several of her young children and looking very, very happy.
Great, thanks, Kristen. Maybe we can move on to the next focus. We've really covered a lot of ground already. We've looked at the value of outdoor play, in particular in the winter. We've looked at some of the gear, the apparel, the clothing that children wear, and also some materials that we might find outside. So now let's think about the intentionality. What are we planning? What kinds of experiences are we planning for children to have? And it's interesting, as we spoke with each of the panelists, they all identified using the ELDS, the Early Learning Development Standards. So we're going to speak a little bit about the domains and how they incorporate those in their outside planning. So Molly, maybe you could start off with a little description of the essential dispositions and how they've come alive in your outdoor space.
Thanks, Donna. I'm happy to do that. So there are 6 essential dispositions that are part of the basis for the ELDS, the Early Learning and Development Standards. And you've already heard from all the panelists lots of examples of these essential dispositions. I'll give you a few. And I had earlier ones figured out, and then I spent the morning at school today and realized that it all happened this morning as well. So these are hot off the press. So the first one is being creative. And certainly the idea that we approach problems from new perspectives. So the outdoor environment is always changing. So it is always providing new perspectives. This morning I was building, because the snow is melted and frozen again, it's nice and choppable and you can build walls with the pieces of snow. So I was doing that and some children joined me and decided they wanted sprinkles on top of my wall. So it's just one example of using imagination, of using creative language around those activities. The second essential disposition is to be inquisitive. And again, the transitory nature of the environment outside lends itself to being curious and asking questions. I had a child come up to me today and notice that it was so much, said to me that it was so much easier to walk in the snow right now. And I asked her why she thought that was. And she said, because it's not so soft anymore. So again, you know, and then we talked about how that had happened. So those changes that happen call for curiosity and questioning. The third essential disposition is being flexible. And again, as the environment changes outside, children are challenged to create new ways to move through it, move across it. This morning was very icy outside, and there were some parts that were particularly slick. And so we talked to the children about crawling across those spaces instead of walking on them as being a safer option. So they all started crawling all over the place, and then they decided there were little hills is the wrong word, but little elevated places that they could try to slide down like penguins. So the flexibility in terms of how they move their body through the environment. Being critical thinkers is number 4. And, you know, we've talked a lot about this, but I framed it in terms of thinking about just decision making. So can I climb up this ladder if I have my boots and my snow pants and my mittens on? Can I get a strong enough grip? What happens when I take my gloves off? Why do I need to keep my hat on today? You know, those both natural consequences and just problem solving and decision making opportunities happen a lot when we're outside in the winter. Number 5 is being purposeful and reflective. And I'm going to return to the child I told you about this morning who was trying to clear the snow off the roof. Children often find activities that they have a plan for, that they have a goal for, that they gathered their tools for. You know, she started by using the shovel trying to push the snow off, realized she couldn't reach high enough to get much of it off. So then she started to bring the blocks out and add to that, and was sharing her plan with other children who are around her. And she was vested in seeing how much snow she could push off. And certainly we have the opportunity to support that learning by then going back to that conversation with her and talking about the steps she took and the tools she used and how she solved those problems. So lots of opportunity to reflect on her purposeful activity. And the last one is being social learners. And people have started to reference this already, but sort of outside lends itself to big body play. And we know that those active learners flourish in that kind of environment, and they have a chance to be the leaders, and they have a chance to shine. I had 2 children today who decided that they were going to take the shovels from the sandbox and they were going to go on a treasure hunt, and they were going to be unburying the vehicles that had been covered by the snow. And they were working as a team, and they were sharing their discoveries, and it allowed them an opportunity to really shine and to work together. And there are lots of those kinds of activities that require more than one child to get something accomplished. And so that it's built into it that they need to work collaboratively with each other. So lots of opportunities to support those 6 essential dispositions.
That's great. It really, Molly, that really helps them come alive. So thank you for those descriptions. And now we're going to look at the domains, and I'm going to ask the other panelists to share a couple of domains. So let's start with Kate. Can you share with us some examples of where we might see the creative arts and the social emotional in your setting?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I can start by just stating the obvious. Of course, all of the social emotional learning that happens inside can also happen outside. So that work around emotions, as well as developing self-awareness and self-concept and competence. Of course, the development of social relationships, as Molly was just referring to, running games, family games, playing out ideas of power through superhero play, or figuring out guidelines together around how are we going to use sticks. All invite rich dialogue around emotions and desires and boundaries. If anyone here has memories of playing outdoors with kids in your neighborhood growing up, you might remember that unique bond that can also be created when making discoveries together or having any kind of adventure or risk-taking together. The outdoors also invites kids to really exert their independence as they explore things like how far away is too far to go from the teacher when we're on a hike. Or in a generously sized play yard, how far can a toddler venture from their teacher and still feel that they can use their teacher as a touchstone? Empathy development is brought to a whole new level as well, as we begin to think about, like, how do the birds eat in the wintertime, and shall we feed them? Should we make snow cakes for animals, like I was talking about before? We consider things like the feelings of animals and their survival needs, and then we start to feel a little bit more in sync with nature together. As far as the creative arts are concerned, the possibilities are endless here as well. Our program actually has an outdoor music station that one of the wonderful teachers created. So all that joy and discovery with music development is available as an opportunity. This past summer was the summer of dance parties. So we were bringing the music players outside and playing tunes by request and having nice jam sessions. Another activity that we did that I thought is this idea of really being grounded in our place and thinking about who has lived here before. So the kids were really interested in dinosaurs and started researching like which dinos lived in our land, and they ended up making a life-size print of the dinosaur. And then that they discovered, and then that has been something that they've been able to rediscover again and again, do some archaeology type learning around that. So those possibilities are just truly endless for creative arts.
Great, yeah, and we'll see a picture of one of those coming up. But in the meantime, Diane, could you tell us, when we spoke with you, it was very interesting when you spoke about science and then social studies in your setting. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So just the mere fact of being outside is science.
Right.
But we don't necessarily plan our day. We know that through the course of the year, through the course of all the seasons, that the frogs are going to be in the pond in the fall. And our program's just school during the school year. So if they're going to be in the pond in the fall, and in the spring, they're going to be frog eggs in the pond, that the pond's going to freeze over during the winter. that maple sugaring season is going to come within the next week. So although we don't plan out our day, nature kind of plans out our year for us. So each day is different dependent on the weather and dependent on the season. And I can say we do other programs besides the nature school. We do a whole host of programs, but our 3, 4, 5-year-olds in this outdoor school have mastered the 2nd grade next gen science standards for seed dispersal, which is one of the next gen science standards for science. They've mastered it just by being here. We haven't done anything with them. We just walk through the fields, through the meadows with them during seed dispersal time, which is in the fall, when seeds are developing, and to touch a jewel weed seed and have it pop, working on your fine and gross motor skills while you're out there, it's just phenomenal. So like I said, we don't necessarily plan anything for science. We know through the course of the year what science topics that we're going to hit. Just today, an eagle landed in one of our trees. One of the groups got pretty close to it. The other groups got to see it fly away. But those are things I can't plan. And those are things that, through the course of the year may or may not happen. But I can tell you that we look at the ELDs very often just to make sure that we are still hitting everything. And we also, our educators write their lesson plans at the end of the day. So they write down what has happened as opposed to what they believe is going to happen for the day.
Okay, thanks, Diane. And Anna, how about some examples of the physical and the literacy domains in your setting?
Sure. So I feel like our teachers have become very adept at adapting their planning and their assessments to outdoor experiences. And I think everyone can agree that so many domains are addressed just through letting children play. Specifically for an outdoor program, physical development and health domains, walking and running over uneven terrain, climbing over fallen trees, so many of those daily activities naturally help children in coordinating their gross motor movements. I know we've spoken a lot about the self-care that, not like self-care, but self-care that the children do in, dressing themselves, changing out their mittens, recognizing when they're hungry or they're thirsty and what needs to happen next. All of those things come really naturally in an outdoor program, but we do planned experiences as well based on the needs that the teachers are finding as they're going through their assessments. So for example, if teachers are planning an early literacy experience and they're having children do field journals, or in a specific example, children were making their mark and it was their version of signing their names. But the wind kept blowing their paper away. It was becoming really difficult. And so the teachers involved the children in the problem solving and in owning their own learning. And so the teacher said, oh no, the wind is making it hard to use the paper to make our mark today. Oh, this is something we really wanted to practice. What else could we do? And the children started saying, well, let's use chalk on the tree stumps, or let's use these sticks and we'll make our mark on the frost on top of the storage bin. And the kids were really excited to participate in that, to create their own planned experience that still met the benchmark that the teacher was shooting for. So it showed a level of flexibility for the teachers and the children that was exciting.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Anna. That is exciting. And finally, Claudia, maybe you could give us an idea of the kind of learning that occurs at your location in math and cognition?
Sure. So math is, as we know, everywhere. And outdoors is just an amazing place to, I guess, to experience it. We don't necessarily plan for math outdoors, but math constantly happens outdoors. And so does sort of comparing, contrasting, adding how many frogs we saw, how many different kinds of leaves, sorting, size order. It could go from the children to sticks. So it's, I guess I could just say it's all around us, and you almost cannot help but talk about it, which I always think about the old classrooms where children just went in and they had to add on a sheet and add X's or add bears, where we're outside and we're saying, no, let's just collect a bunch of leaves and make a bouquet. And then I went again to my I wonder I wonder how many leaves we've collected, and let's compare and see. And if there's snow or mud, let's make a chart and see, how many do you have? How many do you have? And then you can add how many each children have, add them across, add them down, compare who has more, move them around, do the boys, do the girls, do the types. So it's, being outside and having snow and mud and dirt and sand as your chalkboard gives endless opportunities to practice your numbers. And even when you're just counting sticks and you have them in front of you, you can then take it a step further and saying, well, that is the number 3. I wonder how you write the number 3. And then you can begin to introduce with the younger children, 3 lines, 3 sticks, 3 leaves, and start writing the number 3 on the ground, on the sand, or on the snow, or what have you. So that's sort of how we incorporate it. But I think the important thing is knowing that when we plan anything, any sort of standard, it is never just planned for the indoor or the outdoor. It is planned, and let's grab that learning wherever we are in the outdoor classroom or through the woods.
Great. Thanks each of you, because you've really helped to bring the essential dispositions and the domains alive. And if we could look at the next slide, there are a few more examples of kinds of experiences that occur. So in the cognition, cause and effect, numbers of you have mentioned temperatures, temperature changes, the impact on water, cooperating with peers as a social emotional experience, to move those blocks, or to do some painting, as we'll see in another picture coming up. Shoveling snow. I think children can really take responsibility for their own environment and help out with the shoveling, or a big broom to move snow around, which is we're getting a lot of these days. We all have very favorite books around winter experiences or all year round experiences, but in particular the Snowy Day and the Mitten. And I'll bet if we asked others, there would be other great books. Creative. The snow is a real easel, a real palette for spray painting and for some more fine motor painting that we'll see. Measuring with a ruler, lots of different ways of incorporating math and identifying those animal tracks in the snow. Fascinating that we can't see those in other types of the year, but in the snow, they're very vivid often. And finally, playing in the outdoor kitchen, whether it's made of pallets, as Claudia described, or a mud kitchen, or it's a year-round experience to have that kind of dramatic play outside, which is terrific. So if we can move ahead to one more slide and take a look at some of the pictures that you've provided for us, an example of literacy occurring in the outdoor setting. Not quite so wintry, but certainly in the fall, and during COVID with a mask, the teacher is reading a story to children. And we've talked a lot about the ELDSs, and another very meaningful document on the OEC website is a document called Building Meaningful Curriculum, which is really an opportunity to support all children using the ELDs when you're building curriculum. So if you haven't taken a look at that, I really encourage you to do that. And if we could look at the next slide, please. And at the Nature Center, Peter Pratt, look at this, snowshoes. This is a first. I hadn't seen or thought about children wearing snowshoes, but what a great experience and a very different way of moving around. Next slide, please. And here's, I was referring to the painting, not only spray painting, but this is much more of a fine motor using smaller brushes and smaller buckets of paint. And there's some social going on here, working together and doing a joint painting. And the next, please. And here's a child looking for some, or has probably found some animal tracks and is now looking at them and trying to identify them in a field guide. And here we go. Here, you've probably been very familiar with the cover to the ELDs, but again, this document is available on the OEC website, and all of the things that all of our panelists have described today are examples of how they're supporting the use of the ELDs. So we thank you for that.
All right, so we are moving towards our next topic, which is warm attitudes toward cold play. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think when we were talking about the gear, that we really want children and adults to be comfortable outside. It's not really easy to be excited about doing something if your body feels cold and uncomfortable. So in this section, we're really going to talk about the various ways that you've connected with families, staff, and children to ensure that they feel excited and comfortable about spending a lot of time outdoors. Molly, if you could start us off, I'm thinking back to our conversation a few weeks ago. You mentioned about some children who might not really be accepting of wearing outdoor gear. And you also spoke a bit about taking a new staff person in your program and getting her on board with the idea of spending a lot of time outdoors in the cold weather. So if you could share with us some of those things that you shared with us earlier.
Sure. So in terms of children and their experience of being cold or not cold, or one of the things that I have learned over the years is that we really need to listen to them, that children, individual children experience the weather very differently. So, that we need to listen to them and follow their lead. So if you have a child who is either warm and wants to take off a jacket, to validate that and let them try that and let them take it off and see how they feel then, and be ready to help them put it back on if they get cold. Or a child who gets cold outside, offering another layer to put on, or moving around with them. I walked up and down the sidewalk a number of times a few days ago because I had a child who was cold, and rather she looked like she was dressed warmly, but I needed to trust her experience of the moment and get her moving and move with her. And we got to the other side and she was comfortable and carried on with the rest of the time outside. And one of the, in working with the woman that teaches with me, there's just two of us right now. When I was talking to her about this topic, because I know initially this wouldn't have been her choice to spend so much time outside. And I asked her what helped to shift that for her. And she said that what made the difference for her was as soon as we were staying outside for long enough that the children were getting engaged, that she really saw the value of the learning and the experience for them outside. And that made her much more willing to figure out how to keep herself comfortable so that they could have that opportunity. So I think it went along with starting our day outside and guaranteeing that we had enough time for kids to do something, that it made it seem more valuable to her and therefore worth the effort to make sure she was dressed appropriately to be comfortable outside as well.
Yeah, and that's really great, sort of seeing how steps and movement in one direction really propels this idea even further along. So thank you. Mm-hmm. Claudia, can you share with us some of your ongoing communication that you have with families, because we know that they need to have buy-in for this, and also speak to us a bit about getting how you address staff who might be resistant to some cold weather time.
Sure. So with regards to the staff, it's part of our interview process to not simply ask, are you okay being outside with the children for X amount of time? Obviously, it's longer now than it ever was. But it's also given them an example of, okay, because I have found that when you ask people, do you like to be outdoors? The answer is always yes. You know, it's yes. But I think when people answer yes, they are thinking of the beautiful 60-degree weather and it's sunny and breezy and the birds are singing. But now when the wind is howling, I say, and it's raining and the children are saying it's getting cold out and we're still a mile away from where we were, are you still okay with being outside? Because I have found that a teacher that's unhappy being outside really breeds children that are unhappy being outside. So if we're all like gung-ho about, like, oh my gosh. And I literally, when it's raining outside, I greet the children, oh, it's raining, isn't it a great day? Because I have heard so often parents say, oh, it's such a miserable day as they're dropping their children off. So that sets off, you know, the children's expectations that it's going to be a miserable day and I don't want to go outside. So, you know, if there's any hesitation when we are hiring staff about how they feel about those windy days, then we really have to say they might be amazing teachers, but they might be indoor teachers. And there's plenty of schools that are just like that. And there's, you know, that's how that school is. So we thankfully don't have much problems with the staff. But, you know, again, with the families, it's back to sort of what I mentioned before. It's a reminder. And even in this past snowstorm, we had children that come in with their jeans and their sneakers and a nice, beautiful jacket. Oh, where are your snow pants? And, you know, so it's reminder. So it goes out every week in the weekly newsletter, and then it goes out, you know, from me very often. So from the staff as well as from me.
Yeah, so we're really speaking to getting everybody on board with this idea, including families. Kate, I believe you had mentioned that when we spoke about getting buy-in from families, you spoke about how you surveyed them and got their perspective. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our program had closed in March due to coronavirus. And as the state began to reopen and we started to look towards how we might reopen as well, we really turned to our families to see what was going to work for all of us. We knew that the families were on board with being outdoors already because we have always spent a fair amount of time outside. We also knew that being outdoors more could potentially mitigate the spread of the virus. So we wondered how much more time was going to be agreeable. So we did put some proposals and our thinking behind them, and we circulated them via Google Forms to help with our planning. It turned out that the families loved the ideas of being outside more. And since then, we've essentially had 3 schedules. We've worked with the families, again, just with email communication and that sort of thing, to figure out what was going to feel best for everyone. So we had our fully outdoors schedule, except for rest and hygiene in the summer, mostly outdoor schedule as it was beginning to get colder. So outdoors all the time, except for eating, rest and hygiene. And then right now, during the coldest part of the winter, we're in a mode of being outside for a couple of hours in the morning and then again in the afternoon. And we also made plans to improve the quality of the indoor air so that when we are inside, we can be assured that we're doing everything possible to circulate as fresh and clean air as possible. So we just keep that regular and open communication with families. It's really email and phone right now due to COVID. We are just working to be as responsive as possible and doing what we can to keep the groups healthy at the same time. The teachers that we have right now they're so wonderful, and we always have wonderful teachers, and they're totally committed to our outdoor. That said, it's cold outside, and we're outside now more than ever before. So we wanted to make sure that this year in particular, as we were stretching that outside time, that the staff had the gear that they needed to be comfortable. So this year we were able to offer stipends, to staff to purchase additional outdoor gear, and they have gotten themselves things like better gloves or snow pants or snow sneakers, warmer jackets, and that kind of thing. And we also, as others have said, have found that, you know, the right gear just makes all the difference.
Yeah. Thank you. So very true. I sometimes joke because if I step outdoors, my first reaction is, oh, it's not that cold out, because I've been out for 5 seconds and I'm up against the building, and then that attitude changes afterwards. Diane, your nature school is very unique in that you spend almost the entire time outdoors. Can you tell us a bit about what this has meant for implications of hiring staff because of your unique program?
Absolutely. So first of all, our program's only 4 hours, so a little different if you're there the whole day. So our whole day is a little bit different. But our staff are, for the most part, outside the whole day. We do a whole host of other programs. All of our programs are all outdoors, in all weather, in all seasons. For the most part, because we're a nature center, our staff kind of live a natural life. Most of them spend the majority of their free time outside and are active outside. So it's not a big sell for the majority of people that apply for a job here. But much like Claudia, when I'm interviewing, I spend the majority of the interviewing making sure the person understands that we are outside in all weather, in all seasons. So our staff start wearing snow pants around November, and we will be wearing snow. So it doesn't have to have snow on the ground. They just keep us warm. And we will be in snow pants until sometime in April. And some of my favorite weather days are snow pants and no jacket and t-shirts. Those are some of our favorite weather days. But for staff, it's just a matter of making sure that they really know that I mean all weather in all seasons. So a lot of time is spent on that.
Yeah, those very clear expectations are so important. And as you mentioned, there is some degree of being self-selecting. I'm not going to choose to work for a program where it's just not part of my comfort zone.
Correct.
Yeah. And Anna, we've spoken about having the right gear as being so important and families needing to have buy-in as part of that process. Can you respond to how this has worked in particular in your program?
Sure. So I feel like the families that choose our preschool do so because this is the experience they want for their children. They know what they're getting. They know that the children are going to be outside when it's cold and rainy and whatever else, Mother Nature throws at us. But we do increase our communication about weather and about our plans as the temperature gets colder. So we use a platform called Story Park, and we'll send out community posts if the weather looks like it's shifting and perhaps it's going to be colder. And we might send out communication saying, hey, make sure they have those extra layers on today, or the classes may have to come inside for their snack today, or it's looking dangerously cold. We can't do outside time today. We have to be inside because it's below zero. So we've really increased communication about our plans this year. Ultimately, we find that our attitudes as staff are really the guiding light for the entire preschool community. And when we're enthusiastic and intentional about our outdoor time, it's really contagious. And I think it first catches to the children, and then the children come home enthusiastic about their snowy day or about their day in the rainy mud, and the parents then feel that same level of enthusiasm. And maybe a little bit of gratitude that they're not the ones who have to be out there in the mud, that we take such joy in it. But I do feel really fortunate to have educators in our program that are so comfortable being outside, who have the appropriate gear, and that they find a sense of peace and fulfillment in being outside with kids in the rain and the snow. And they're also seeing the benefits and the growth in the children from being predominantly outside. I think everybody feels the same way. I think families are really grateful for the amount of time we spend outside specifically this year because they recognize that it is a mitigating factor in the spread of COVID. And that's a huge benefit.
Yeah. Thank you. A recurring theme there was certainly clear communication. So let's take a look at the next slide. We'll sort of summarize some of what we heard just now from the panelists, as well as some of what we heard during the interviews. That clear communication with both families and staff is really key. Lots of reminders, and it was nice to hear that there were a variety of different ways that families receive those reminders. Support and assistance. I know some of the family child care providers spoke about some of the same strategies about gear swaps, going to Goodwill and saying, oh, I know this one's outgrowing her snowsuit, I'm picking up another one. Surveying families is a wonderful way to both gain their perspective and therefore increase the likelihood that you'll have their buy-in. We heard a number of times that if you're very clear in your communication, then your staff become a bit self-selecting. I'm going to choose to work here because an outdoor active lifestyle is part of who I am originally. And we also heard about respecting of autonomy, in particular, as Molly was talking about, children who may say, I'm not cold, I don't need to have my coat on, or I don't need to have it zipped. Let's take a look at the next slide. We'll see just a few images that might represent some of these concepts. Here is one that goes to show if you have the right gear, you are much more comfortable, and hence you have a much warmer attitude about outdoor play. And the next slide shows what was also a recurring theme from everyone, which is spare clothes, extra hats, extra mittens, and more extras, because that increases the likelihood that everybody's going to feel successful.
Great. Thanks, Kristen and the panelists. I'm pleased to be able to share our story from our third family provider, Mary Coburn. Mary is a provider in New Hartford, and she spends time outdoors with the children in her family childcare home, and it's really just an extension of her own personal lifestyle. She grew up in a family that spent lots of time outdoors. They fished, they hiked, and they enjoyed nature. As an adult and early childhood educator, those activities continue within Mary's program. However, she also recognizes that spending a lot of time outside is not only aligned with her own personal values, excuse me, spending time outdoors is really so important for her children's growth and development. Mary cited several research studies and has read over the years that shows that children benefit both academically and in their social emotional skills. And she sees this within her program as well. And this was also shared by the early panelists. She also sees that spending time outside reduces the spread of illness and keeps everyone much healthier, something again that the research indicates. Mary starts preparing for the cold weather outdoor time ahead of time. This includes making sure, again, this communication with families, that families are completely clear about what goes on in her program regarding outdoor play. She does this both by clearly stating expectations in her contract and by sending email reminders about specific outdoor gear children will need as cooler weather approaches. She works with her families to ensure this happens and mentioned that she recently picked up a snowsuit, again, knowing that a child would be outgrowing one. Craigslist and FreeCycle have been other resources that she and her families used, and so that everyone has what they need when they need it. Another way she gets ready for cold weather is to start building excitement and anticipation. By being excited about cold and snow, she helps to build them up for success. If there was ever a time that the children may be feeling tapped out in the cold, Mary has a strategy. She has what she calls an idea bin. It's simply a container full of slips of paper, and each one contains ideas for some of the things they might do outside to spark their interest. In the summer, Mary and her family childcare children spend the majority of the days outside. In the winter, they do spend most time inside, some time inside, but most time outside, several hours a day, including eating snacks and lunch. She really has sought out, applied for, and used a variety of grant opportunities to allow this to happen. Mary described to us how knowing her children well through careful observation is important when it comes to outdoor cold weather play. She knows which children have the skills to help the other ones get mittens on and zip up coats, and encourages that interdependence amongst them. Through observation and making notes, she knows what they do, where they are developmentally, and uses that information to know how to teach them the skills that they need. Mary again uses the L's as a curriculum resource and recognizes that outdoor time in the winter can support so many domains. Sledding and building snow forts addresses physical, painting snow mounds addresses creative, looking for, analyzing, and researching animal tracks in the snow addresses science, and playing make-believe with the fairy gardens addresses cognitive. Thanks, Mary, for sharing. So if we can move on to the next slide. We've talked about a variety of resources as we've gone through this session. We've mentioned the L's, And there's a link for the ELDS on the OEC website, along with the Building Meaningful Curriculum document. Kate mentioned the Natural Start Alliance. It's a great resource to understand a little bit more about early childhood and preschool and outdoors. It's free to join them, and there's tremendous documents on there. The next document I bet you'll recognize is the Child Care Weather Chart. Please do note that this is a resource. It's certainly not a requirement of OEC or a regulation, but it's also a helpful guide in knowing about appropriate times to get outside. And finally, there's a document called Is It Safe to Play Outdoors in the Winter? Just a 2-page article about the importance of fresh air and the benefit of it, and how being outside in the winter is healthy. And there is a reference to from caring for our children. Finally, on the next slide, NAEYC has a platform called Hello, and it's a compilation of their interest forums and online communities. It's really a great resource. People from all over ask questions and and provide some resources. And the reason I bring this up especially is that there's been a recent strand, a lengthy strand on outdoor winter play. So if you'd like to check out Hello, you'll hear some information from others around the country. So although these are only 6 resources, there's a plethora of information out there. Nature play and outdoor play for children, especially in all seasons, there's a lot of information, so do look on the internet.
We are getting ready to wrap up. We want to thank our panelists. We are so grateful that they spent time speaking with us on the phone, being interviewed on Zoom, and now being a part of this webinar. So we thank Joanne, Yasmine, Mary, Claudia, Molly, Diane, Kate, and Anna. We thank Patty and Christy from the licensing unit who shared with us earlier. We thank all of you viewers. We're so delighted that you took time out of your day to spend hearing from these local experts, and now we're going to use that for some reflection. How can you increase the amount of time you're spending outdoors, and how can you make that time meaningful for your curriculum? A couple of recurring themes that we heard over and over again today are having the right gear is really important. There are creative and no cost or low cost ways to obtain that gear. Clear communication with both your families and current or potential staff is key. And lastly, there's so much exploration, discovery, and learning that can take place outside, especially in the outdoor cold weather time. Donna, you want to say some closing remarks too?
Sure. I too, Kristen, want to thank each of the panelists and the family providers. They were so generous with their time, their insights, their willingness to share, and I think we all benefited from hearing their stories. Our focus today was on cold weather play, but we also want to reinforce that outdoor experiences are important for children throughout the year. So I want to say to you, thank you. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for implementing wonderful experiences for children outdoors. And most importantly to say, we thank you for watching, and we wish you warm attitudes towards cold play.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us. This presentation just blew me away. This was simply an amazing gift from our panelists, sharing all their expertise and real-world experiences. There is just so much here to take away. And I simply loved watching the support and the excitement that the panelists had for each other. This was just a great display of professionalism in our field. So my question to our audience members, what are you thinking about? What will you do? Remember that you can start small, a container garden, right? And be persistent to do away with those obstacles. So do the, I wonder. Will you start your day outdoors? Will you have an indoor classroom and an outdoor classroom? Does your outdoors have fields or sidewalks? Will you start borrow baskets or exchanges for gear for children and for your adults? And how will you change your hiring, right? Remember that it starts with us. We set the tone, and if we don't like being outdoors, we can't expect the children to love the outdoors. Are you going to make sequences for the children, visual sequences of how to get dressed? There's just so much. This was such a rich, rich presentation. How will you connect to the natural rhythms of the world and involve your families too? So much to do, so much to think about. I invite you to make a plan. Please join me in thanking our fabulous moderators today, Donna and Kristen. Thank you so much. We also thank our licensing staff and our impressive panelists. We know that they are great leaders and they have great staff behind them too. Maybe this presentation piqued your curiosity and you'll look up their programs or reach out to them. This team put in amazing hours to bring this webinar. You can tell just how invested they are about outdoor experiences. So please share this webinar and our air quality webinar with others. Know that we will have more to come about best practices in high quality childcare in Connecticut. Thank you to our audience for giving us the questions, and on behalf of the OEC, our moderators and panelists, thank you for joining us today. And remember, there's no bad weather, just bad clothing. Be well, everyone.